The session this evening is going to look around club financial management. It's part of a wider session or series of webinars we are running over the course of the summer, looking at different aspects of running grassroots football clubs, doing induction sessions for volunteers, and just trying to make sure that amongst the grassroots football community, we are in the strongest possible position for when we return in August and September, and we can hopefully, fingers crossed, finally put COVID behind us and come back for a normal football season for the first time in about 3 years. So the session this evening, what we are going to cover, we're going to be looking at FA and county FA expectations around club finances. We're going to look at some very basic budgeting, and I'll kind of come on to that, and just a little bit around club structures and how you might want to try and get your head around income and expenditure over the course of a season. Going to look at the impact of discipline on budgeting and club finances, because that's probably, particularly for adult men's clubs, going to be the biggest wildcard or biggest challenge that you have to face over the course of the season. We'll also look at debt recovery, so when things don't go so well and the players don't then pay you back, what help we as a county FA can provide. And we'll also look at FA systems and what is out there from a Football Association point of view to try and help you with keeping track of finances and sorting out payment systems with players. Now, sorry, I've gone too far. What I won't be doing, unfortunately, is being able to tell you how much money you need and how to make it. That is another session we'll be doing later on in the summer around facilities and funding from John Wood in the development team. Can I just ask if someone can pop into the chat, if I click through onto the next slide, no, it does look like it's doing it properly now. Sorry, it seemed to jump earlier on. So first session first topic I want to look at this evening is around FA and county FA expectations. So in other words, kind of what we as the governing body expect and ask of clubs in from a financial setting. The first one for that, and reason a lot of you on the call will be with us this evening, is that we do ask clubs to appoint a named treasurer. That is part of one of the 3 or 4 if you're a youth club, key roles that every club is required to declare to us as the county FA on an annual basis. The treasurer themselves is then responsible for the day-to-day financial administration of the club. So making and receiving all payments on behalf of the club and recording every transaction. Treasurer is also responsible for ensuring the financial integrity and the financial health of the club, so making sure it remains in a financially healthy, stable and sustainable position. So I'm guessing that's what that will chime with yourselves and very much the roles that you fulfill within your club at the moment. And really it just said it's there as that key financial administrator, doing all of the transactions for and on behalf of the club. The reason that we want to know the treasurer from a county FA point of view is because of that level of seniority. It comes with a little bit of expectation that we should be able to get in touch with you if we are beginning to pick up any issues around non-payment of fines, non-payment of affiliation invoices and so forth. We know that if we're not getting any kind of response or action from the club secretary, who would be our normal day-to-day contact, we can go directly to yourselves and try and make sure we understand if there's any issues within the club that we can try and help you out with. The club should also then have a nominated club bank account. This is something that should be in the club's name and should have 2 or 3 signatories who are either unrelated or non-cohabiting. What that means is that there should be 2 effectively independent people that have financial signatory authority on behalf of the club to make transactions and to commit club funding or commit club funds and finances towards specific expenditures. The reason we ask for that, and I know that it can be a bit of an administrative chore, particularly when you're setting up a club, and is a bit of a block and an additional hoop that you have to jump through. But actually the reason that we ask clubs to have a bank account in the name of the organisation is it provides protection for yourself as the volunteer. There are 2 aspects to that. The first is that it provides protection because you're not using your own personal funds and your own personal accounts for making payments. So you're reducing your own personal risk in terms of fraud and your own personal liability for your finances. Second aspect of that, though, is that everything is going in and out of a club bank account that 2 or 3 named signatories within the club have access to. You're also reducing your own risk in terms of accusations that could be levelled against you through no fault of your own, but just because you know that there is a level of transparency there and a level of integrity there that means that you should not be having allegations against you that funds may be going missing or being misappropriated. So if you don't have a bank account set up in the name of the club at this stage, would strongly urge you to do so. And I know probably about 80 or 90% of the clubs that put through BACS transactions to us at the County FA, it will come through from the name of the club. But there are still some where it will come through from an individual. I've just seen a question pop up in the chat. Is that 2 signatories per transaction or just 2 signatories? Certainly in the good old days of checks, it might be that you would actually need 2 signatories on each individual check. What will normally happen now is that, I think from a practicality point of view, it will be one person that goes through and does a BACS transfer, let's say, on behalf of the club. There does need to be a second sign off on that, but there should be at least 2 or 3 signatories who have access to the bank account. And anytime that finances are being committed, it should be signed off or verified by a second person, just so that you know there is that opportunity to check and challenge and a bit of oversight, just to make sure that there are 2 independent people that are signing off in the bigger, grander scheme of things on any transaction that's being made, even if it's not physically signing the same piece of paper twice. Third aspect that we ask for clubs then is to provide annual reports to members. And I know this was something that a number of clubs put as something they would like a bit more information on. And so I've added an extra slide on this a little bit later on. We'll go into it in a bit more detail. But generally, we would expect that the treasurer or the club management committee should be reporting to the club members on an annual basis about the financial health and the financial transactions of the club. Within that, there are varying degrees of what that may mean, and I think you've got to make sure you find an appropriate level for the size and the structure of your club. Certainly, if it is a club that is playing within the National League, if you are incorporated, it will be a legal requirement. If you're a registered charity, it will be a legal requirement. But let's say one step down from that, and it's still an unincorporated association, so still a membership body, but you have large number of teams, large number of members, so quite a high level of financial transactions that are going through the club on an annual basis. In those situations, I would strongly encourage you to look to get verified or audited accounts, so that there is an external body that is coming in and doing some kind of check on those accounts to provide reports to the club members that yes, everything is being handled appropriately and is being the club remains in a strong financial position. At the other end of the scale, then perhaps what we always say is like the one team pub clubs, where it is a much looser association of friends that get together to play football. It may just be a case that actually you providing a balance sheet on an annual basis that says, this is all the money that's come in, and you can categorize that as much as you want. This is all the money that's gone out, again, perhaps categorized by league fees, by pitch hire and so forth, and then providing a start balance and an end balance. Again, from your perspective as a treasurer, what this does is it gives you the opportunity to demonstrate transparency to your members, to continue to gain their trust, and to show that the club is being handled and managed in a strong and sound financial position. If you're interested around the difference between audited and verified, so this is my understanding of it. I'm not a financial accountant. I don't come from that background, but my understanding is that audited means that it is that an external accredited organisation basically goes through line by line and reviews every transaction that has been committed by the club. Verified then means that an accredited organisation has reviewed the final accounts and statements that the club has prepared. So it's the difference of going through line by line and signing off on every single item, and doing a high top level review that says, yes, actually this does all balance and add up at the end. We're verifying that the amounts have been declared match, and that the income and the expenditure match what's being reported. So moving on then to what I'm calling the very basic budgeting. I'm not going to lie, football can be an expensive business, even at the lowest grassroots levels. It's part of the nature of the beast in terms of increasing requirements, yes, from a county FA in terms of wanting to make sure that all of our players and volunteers are covered by insurance. Affiliation and membership fees for clubs and leagues in the county, and competitions that allow us as a county to continue to function, run the competitions we do and provide the level of support we do. And then obviously you will need your own internal costs around pitch hire, around kits, around just trying to balance the books on a weekly and an annual basis. Our advice really would be to break it down into annual or match day budgets, which kind of give you a bit of a fixed and a variable plan. Obviously, I think the larger the club and the grander the scale of your operations, the more things will go into this. But I'm really going to tailor this towards, I think the phrase is the virtual clubs, the ones that don't necessarily have things like clubhouses, club bars in operation, paid members of staff that may be operating behind a bar. Trying to break this down into the most basic kind of operation at this stage. I'll come on to different kinds of ways that you can look at those budgets, the annual and the match day ones, in a second. The other thing that's important is to consider the financial impact of your decisions that are being made. What I would say is it's certainly, it's great when club managers want to go off, or sorry, when team managers want to go off and take part in new competitions, take a team over to Spain to play in the Barcelona FC Cup or something like that, enter or run a new match, tournament for local clubs in the summer. But each of those will obviously have a financial impact on the club. And it's important to make sure that there is a structure in place that allows you to make informed decisions as to what kind of operations can be run. And it's important as the management committee that comes through yourselves rather than being delegated down to each individual team manager that tend to overstretch themselves, shall we say. The other thing is to be open and honest with your players or with your officials, both in terms of the example I just gave around team managers wanting to enter into new competitions and grow the club perhaps beyond its means. But also, if you are that one team pub club, to be open and honest with your players about how much it's actually costing you to run the club, and therefore how much you need to set their membership or their match day subs at. And I think that's where doing the right kinds of budgeting and the right kind of planning and having that open and transparent process with your members will really put you in a strong position, because players will again have greater trust for the management committee and for the financial management of the club, but they're also probably more likely to understand why subs may have had to go up by £5 this year, or their annual membership may have had to go up by £20, whatever it may be. So breaking them down then into annual and match day costs, I'm going to start with the annual ones first. And these are pretty much fixed costs that you all know will have to come out in one lump sum between July and August, or June and August every single year. So this is probably where you want to rank these or budget these and balance them against your annual membership dues that you may be taking from players. Things you know you'll have to take care of every single season will be things like county FA affiliation. For the last two seasons, 20 to 21 and 21 to 22, that has been subsidised by Sports England. But I want to make sure you are aware that they will be coming back in some form for the 22-23 season, that the clubs and teams will be expected to pay county FA affiliation fees again. You also have public liability and personal accident insurance requirements. You have league membership fees. You then have cup entries, and that may be for county cups, for league cups, external cup competitions. Some leagues will then charge player registrations by the player. And then you may also find that you need to refresh the kit either in part or in whole every single summer. So those are the kind of costs I think you know are being paid upfront before you've even kicked a ball each season. And the best way to then balance those off will be against the membership dues. Just want to touch slightly on insurance, because this is something which I think there's been a bit of change and a bit of increase in insurance costs over the last few years. From our point of view as the county, we think it's the right thing to do, and I know it has passed some additional costs on to the clubs. But I think when it's broken down appropriately, it's something where it really pays for itself. So at the moment, let me backtrack. Before the 2021 season, the season just gone, clubs were allowed to affiliate with only the most basic level of personal accident insurance. Even for Bluefin, it's called the basic policy for adult and basic policy for youth. What we found was that policy did not cover the most common types of injuries that you're going to face in football. It didn't cover broken bones, didn't cover dislocations, and didn't cover ligament damage. So basically it didn't cover about 90% of football injuries. So we made it mandatory at the beginning of last season that it had to increase to the intermediate coverage. We provided a bit of a bridging subsidised cost last season, and now this season clubs are paying that in full. So intermediate coverage from Bluefin, it now covers those types of injuries, and it is £27 per year. Now, you may have seen there's options to upgrade that insurance through Bluefin to what they call their superior level. They do it from superior 120, I think it's 120, 200, 300, 400, and 600. And the figure at the end of that title refers to annual income weekly income subsidies that can be offered to injured players. So if you've got a team that has a lot of self-employed people, perhaps they work in construction or labourers or more manual jobs, where actually if they are injured, they're not going to be able to work, they're going to lose income. We strongly recommend that that's looked at. And I'm not saying this is a sales pitch for Bluefin. I'm saying this because I think my priority and the priority for us at the county is wanting to make sure that our players and our volunteers are protected. I know a lot of clubs are resistant to upgrade the insurance because it's additional costs. But I think I've got a slide here which kind of should cover some. Oh, it should have covered some of those. Has this come in? So, nope, it does not look like it wants to come in. So apologise for that. My slide doesn't seem to be working. What I'm trying to say, which you can't see unfortunately, is that actually what can be seem at a team or a club level as a large increase in your annual dues, actually if you break it down to a player level, it's minimal. So the increase to go from intermediate coverage to superior 120 to give people that £120 a week coverage if they aren't able to bring in their regular income because of an injury they've picked up, works out at under £1 per player based on an average 30 player squad. That goes all the way up to the superior 600, I think it is, which, £600 a week if you are losing your regular income because of a football injury, actually would cost each player £5 per year. And what I'm trying to get at through all of this is not increase sales for Bluefin, but is to try and demonstrate that actually when you start breaking things down to a player-by-player level, some of those large increases that you may get put off when you consider it from a club or a team level actually become quite minimal or much more manageable on a player-by-player basis. And I think certainly if I was playing for a club and they said that actually we want to increase your annual membership by just £5 per year, but in doing so, if you get injured, you're going to be covered up to this level on every week in lost earnings, I think it would make a lot more sense. Just goes to show that the importance of effective budgeting at the start of the season and working out different ways to present that data to players to get them on board. Once you get into the season, then there will be fixed match day costs. And again, you should be able to work this out in advance pretty much on a week-by-week basis. You will know what the pitch hire will be if you do have to hire a pitch, or if you are in a fortunate position where you own your own facility, you'll be able to work out the cost per game for each match that you host. Or it may be that if you are organising shared transportation for away games or subsidising players perhaps for for petrol money going to games, you can work out a match day cost for travel. You should know at the beginning of the season what your referee fees will be, whether that's for a county cup game, for a league game, league cup, or external cup competition. You might work out a rough amount per week, how much you're going to spend in refreshments, so bottles of water, oranges for halftime, as the old image goes, and then potentially for kit washing, if that is done either subsidising a volunteer or a member of the team officials that washes it at home, or if you take it down to a laundrette. So through that, you're able to work out your match day costs, and off the back of that, then you can look at what your match day subs will need to be. And again, there may be a little bit of trial and error working out on average how many people may be coming, are likely to show up every week, and you may want to go on the conservative side, because if more people show up, then that's just a little bit extra in the club coffers. But you want to make sure that on a week-to-week basis, you can cover those weekly fixed costs that you know you're going to incur. Coming away from the pre-season and the week-to-week costs, you've then got what I've called the occasional costs. And again, you may want to then balance these against occasional income. So looking at refreshing kit and equipment, which may have to be done every couple of years, or you may find that you've got an urgent need because goalposts have been broken, or corner flags have gone missing, or a set of the kits has gone moldy or something, I don't know, and therefore needs to be replaced. And you may look to get one-off sponsorship, whether that's in cold hard cash or whether that's in kind, to help support with covering the cost of those. Equally then, larger scale infrastructure ones, so grounds or facility maintenance, or perhaps if you do want to do larger scale equipment refurbs, you can look at getting individual grants around those. Now, I know that there was a request for talk about finances and funding this evening. Unfortunately, that is not my area of expertise. However, fortunately, we will be running a similar session to this in the middle of August. I think it's the 19th of August. We'll be running that one through John Wood, who is our head of delivery. And I'm just popping into the chat a similar registration form if you do want to sign up for that one now, that will let you to register for that and get the information from our local experts. And then finally, in the light blue at the bottom, you will see the wildcards, the one-off events like club tournaments that you may feel need to be self-sufficient, self-funding, whether that is hosting a tournament and setting the income against entry fees from external clubs and teams that are participating, or if you want to send a team overseas or to take part in another tournament, you might look at doing that as part of a sign-up fee with parents, where actually it's a separate registration outside of the normal team. So only those players that pay to go cover the cost of their own ticket, and that covers the cost of the entry fee. And then you get discipline, and I will come on to that in a bit more detail shortly. And those of you who have known me over the course of the last 6 years know that discipline is kind of where my background is, and I've done to death in various guises, but we've put a lot of resources together to try and help clubs with managing that, and we're delighted to kind of be able to present that for the first time this evening. Before I move on to that, though, I did want to just touch a bit more on the annual reporting, because I'm conscious that it was requested by quite a few people that were signing up for this evening. So what is annual reporting, and what do you need to provide? So I mentioned earlier about the different levels, going from audited accounts all to verified to a more basic balance sheet and kind of an end of year statement that you might want to provide to your members. This, I think, covers what I would say the minimum that should be presented to your members. And effectively, it's a list of your income and expenditure across key budget lines. If you put yourselves in the shoes of one of your players or a parent for one of your players and ask yourself what kind of information you would want to know, I think it's important. They will want to know the money that they're paying every season in membership dues or weekly match subs. Where is that going? How is that being spent across the club? How much money's come in through that different level of membership? And then how has that been allocated, whether that is against pitch hire, whether it's against affiliation fees, tournament entry fees, and so forth. In addition to that, you should provide a list of assets and liabilities. So that will be things like, in terms of assets, it's funds in the bank. It may be a list or a total amount that is owed to you by debtors of money to the club. So that could be internal fines. It could be people that haven't paid the final installment of their subscriptions, but it's money that the club has as a declared asset that you can rely on, and is expected money that comes in and contributes towards the total worth of the club. Equally, then you should provide a list of liabilities. So that will be unpaid invoices that you owe, again, whether that's to the county FA for affiliation, for disciplinary fines, to the league for league entries for the following season, and so forth. Off the back of that, you're able to provide a total figure, which is effectively the balance of the club. So hopefully that will be in surplus, and say that you have been able to save a bit of money, and you may then want to provide a bit of information around long-term development plans about why you're saving money and what you intend, how much you intend to be able to put aside and what it will go towards. Equally, I think it would be fair to say, even if you put yourselves in the shoes of a player, that if a club does have a little bit of expendable income or a little bit of wiggle room, call it what you will, a little bit of a slush fund or a cushion, so that actually if some unexpected expense does suddenly crop up, they know that it'll be covered by the club, and actually they won't have to dig into their pocket necessarily at that point, or that won't suddenly fall on a liability for any individual within the club. Ultimately, I think the point at the bottom is key, and that is that the goal here is transparency. Benefits of that I've kept repeating over the course of this evening. It engenders trust amongst your players. It will make them more accepting of the cost it is for them to play football, because they will understand actually the cost it is for the club to play football. And I think it will put yourselves as treasurers in a stronger position when you're then, should we say, negotiating or promoting changes in costs or long-term visions for where the club is going, because everybody is aware of the current financial situation. There are various templates available. I haven't put any in here, and that's probably because there's so many different types out there, and different people will do it in different ways. So if you are a bigger club, high level club and you are looking at going through auditing or verification of accounts, it may well be that an accountant that you work with will want it in a certain way, or will produce it in a certain way. Equally, if you are looking at producing it yourself just for your members, there are lots and lots of templates available online, or you can just look at the way that your league present it to yourselves, because they should be, fingers crossed, presenting annual league accounts to you as part of their AGM every year, so you can kind of get a feel for what kind of presentation it should be in. Are there any questions just around that slide before I move on to the next section? I haven't seen anything in the chat, but if anybody wanted to put their hand up or unmute and throw anything at me, more than happy to, because I'm conscious I've gone for about half an hour now and covered a fair amount. Okay, I can't hear anything, so I'll come on to discipline. As I said, this is very much what my background has been in. And I'm really hoping, because I know I've got some fancy slides coming up in a minute, I really hope those are going to work, because I know they haven't so far. Okay, so as a quick introduction to discipline, and I hope this is everybody is aware of this, but red and yellow cards, let's face it, are part and parcel of football. We're not going to get away from that. They're there for a reason, but they incur with them, pretty much every single card incurs a financial penalty. The only one that doesn't is a sin bin caution. So the fines will range from about £12 for a caution, everything other than dissent, all the way up to about, I think it's £55 for the most serious level offences at adult football. Invoices come out from the county FA on a Wednesday, and as the club you have 2 weeks to make payments on that. If payment isn't made within the 2 weeks, you will incur a 25% late fee. And if that is not then paid, then the player and the club may well face a suspension for it. In adult football, the player and the club are both seen as individually responsible, severally and liable, and individually and severally liable for the fine. What that means is that if it is not paid, then both the player at an individual level and the club at an organisational level will be suspended from football until it is paid. Sorry, the player and the team are suspended from football until it is paid. At youth football, we can't do that against children, funnily enough. So the club is solely responsible for making sure that the payment is made. And if payment is not made, then we will still suspend the team, but no action is taken against the individual child in that instance. So that's your sort of regular week-to-week discipline. Now, where it gets tricky or where it gets difficult is that players, teams, and clubs can also accumulate additional fines for ongoing poor discipline. And that is something that goes throughout the course of the season, and so therefore pulls in a couple of different challenges. I'm going to come on to that in 1 second, but I kind of just want to cover off that week-to-week process first. And what we've put together is what we see as a recommended process for when fines are picked up for disciplinary incidents. So these are for your regular yellow and red cards that will happen on any given Saturday. So week 0, the very first one there, we're going to receive notification of the card, process it from our end, and the club will receive notification of the card and the fine. We would always urge and encourage the club to make payment to us at that point. Not just because we want the money, but because it means that you know that there's not going to be any issues down the line of that the club or the team as an organisation facing suspension, so you having to forfeit fixtures. You know that week to week you're still going to be able to play football. At the same time, we would then suggest that you inform the player, make sure they know they got that yellow or red card, and request payment from them at the next training or game. Equally, you could do that at the end of the fixture, at the end of the match. That player's picked up a yellow card in that game. Before he goes home, coach says to him, mate, picked up a booking, you owe us 12 quid. Can you make sure you bring it on Tuesday for training, or make sure you bring it next week? If the player then fails to make payment within that first week, again, we would suggest perhaps give them a little bit of an extension. Want to make sure you're staying on a good relationship with them, but let them know that if they don't make payment at that point, by the end of the second week, that you as a club will suspend them internally. Now, I know that it's a tough line to take, and when you may be struggling for players week in, week out, it's a very tough line to take. But it just means that the player knows that actually the thing that matters to them is playing football. And they know that if they fail to make payment 2 weeks in a row, actually now they're not going to be able to play. Gives a little bit of an incentive there for them to put their hand in the pocket. So if after the end of that second week the player fails to make payment again, we would recommend formalising the process basically. So issue that player with a formal invoice in writing, and I'll come on to why that's important later, and tell them they've got 28 days then to make payments. And that they remain on the bench until that payment is made. So you're sticking by your guns, you're making that internal decision that actually until you get refunded by the player for money that you've spent on their behalf, they're not actually going to be allowed to play. So that takes us until another 28 days is until the end of week 6. So if the player still hasn't at that stage, it's been 6 weeks now since they picked up that booking or red card, contact us at that stage, and we can then work you through the player debt recovery process. At that stage, and I'll come on to this in a bit more detail later, we incur the debt on behalf of the player, and they've got to make payment to us within 21 days, or we will suspend them from all football. Because what may happen is that during that 28 days that you've benched him, he or she may have been going off and playing for another league, another team in another league throughout this whole process. So actually they may not be missing out on any football at that point. But once it comes to us, once it's gone through that escalation process, we can then say, no, nationally, you are banned from football until you make payment on this. Player then makes payment to us as the county, and then we refund yourselves at the club. I know it's a bit of a convoluted process, but such are FA regulations sometimes. And I will come on to debt recovery in a little bit more detail later. But this is our recommended process for handling and managing those week-to-week disciplinary fines that crop up. I do have a guide that I will share at the end of the session in the chat, just so that actually we've got this in a bit more of a structured PDF document, so you can take it away with you and review internally. Moving on now, I want to touch on the accumulation charges I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So as I said, throughout the course of the season, players, teams and clubs can pick up additional fines and additional charges from the County FA for accumulation of misconduct. The different thresholds are broken down on the screen. So we have respect sanctions, which is for accumulation of yellow cards for dissent, red cards for abusive language, and proven misconduct charges. So you get an R6, which is just an admin fee, I think, and then you get 10, 15, and 20. Multiplayer misconduct charges, so if 6 or more players get cautioned or sent off within a single game. And then we have charges under FA Rule E20, which is the glorious catch-all charge that the FA have, which basically says it's the club's responsibility to make sure that players behave themselves. That gives us the authority to go in when there are accumulation breaches over the course of the season to say, over the course of the season, players have consistently been failing to behave. You've had the opportunity to put that right. The club hasn't, so therefore we want to take a little bit of additional action and kind of put a bit more of an incentive or a disincentive towards the club to make sure the players behave themselves. At an individual level, as you know, I'm sure from watching the Premier League and Championship and so forth, if players accumulate 5 yellow cards before the 31st of December, they will receive a suspension and an additional fine, and it's 10 cautions by the second Saturday in April or something along those lines. So it's important that you're aware that what I'm trying to get at with all this is that actually one caution at the beginning of the season may come back to haunt you in several different guises later on in the year, because that caution for dissent or a red card for abusive language in week 1 will also count towards your R6, your R10, your R15, and your R20. The same offence counts towards each one of those. It could also count towards accumulating 75 disciplinary points. It could also be one of 6 cautions or red cards that were received in that game and count towards a multiplayer misconduct charge. And quite quickly, what we're seeing is that what we think is a £12 caution or a £25 red card in the first week of the season, over the course of that entire season, has actually cost something like £150 because of its contribution towards some of these. So it's important that as a club you're aware that they're working in the background, but also that when you are budgeting, when you are looking to get reimbursed by players, you're considering how you may deal with these towards the latter end of the season without having to dig into your own pocket or into the club's reserves to cover the cost of them. And this is where I really hope that this has worked. I don't think it has. There we go. I've got to go forward to go backwards. Right. So we've identified 4 different models that clubs may want to adopt to manage this process. I don't have a preference. It is for the club to work out based on your own requirements, based on your relationship with players, as to which one may be the best way of handling it. Mark, I can see your hands up. Did you want to come in now, or once I've gone through the models? You just need to unmute yourself and you'll be able to speak up. There we go.
So it's just last piece.
Yep.
Is the accumulation against the whole club or just one particular team?
Okay. I will go back to that and show you. So respect sanctions are by club. Multiplayer misconduct charges are by team because it relates to one game. And then for the E20 charges, it's a mixture. So every disciplinary offence has a points value, ranging from 1 for a caution all the way up to 7 for a red card for spitting. If a team reaches 75 points, and that's at a team level, you will receive an E20 charge. What I would say is that the vast majority probably of adult men's teams at step 5 and above will hit that, just because referees are slightly stricter. You get the odd foul. These things happen in football. You then have 3 additional club level ones. So if 4 or more incidents of violent conduct across all teams within a club, you'll receive an E20 charge. That one is really unfortunate because it doesn't matter whether you're a 1-team club or whether you're a 40-team club. It's still done at a club level. So our larger teams, or sorry, our larger clubs the big youth community clubs like Ascot or like Maidenhead, they're probably more likely to incur it just by sheer likelihood of probability or sheer probability and weight of numbers than a one-team pub club, let's say.
Okay.
You then get for 2 abandonments, and again that's at a club level, and 2 or more charges of aggravated or discriminatory language, and again that's at a club level.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. This is now coming in the right order. Perfect. So the 4 different models we've identified. As I said, I don't necessarily have a favorite. It will be for you to manage internally based on your own needs and relationship with the players. All I would say is if you do want to adopt one of these, don't hide it. Be upfront with your players. Feel free to share this presentation with them to explain to them that their caution or red cards in the first week could incur costs later on in the season. And actually, as a club, you need to be able to manage that appropriately. And this is why actually you may be charging them slightly more. So first option is to just fund it out of general club finances. So if you do have a membership model that gives you quite a nice or a large cushion, you might decide that actually it can come out of that. Pros of that is that the club's responsible, so you know that you're not going to be chasing players the whole time, and that you've got the funds there ready to incur those kinds of costs. On the downside, you've got to make sure you budget for that at the beginning of the season. It may impact resources or other budget lines. So if you do have a particularly bad season for whatever reason, it may then impact other projects. And also you could say that individual players aren't actually being held account for their own misbehavior in those instances. Second model then that you might want to look at is charging players at the time of the offence. Now, this way you guarantee the fees are going to be paid and they're being allocated against the relevant player. But you need careful calculation and transparency about this, because otherwise the players, I say may object, they almost certainly will, if in the first week of the season you're telling a player that his £12 fine is actually going to cost him 20 quid. Maybe a perfectly legitimate reason for that, and that may be actually an appropriate amount you might charge internally for these kind of fines. You just need to make sure the players are aware why you are charging them something higher than other players, other teams may get charged, or other clubs may get charged. The way I would try and sell that to them is that it's a small increase for each internal or each card that they're receiving. And that actually, if it gets to the end of the season and you haven't picked up those accumulation charges, you know, that's being invested back in the club or the team. Maybe that's going to go towards paying a new kit. Maybe it's going to go behind the bar at the end of season celebration, and you're buying the first couple of rounds of drinks because the behavior has picked up. I think if you try and pick the right way to sell it to the players, they may well understand it's going to be a slight premium up front because they got booked or because they've got sent off. But actually, if they then change their behavior and across the course of the season there aren't any further issues, they get a reward at the end of it. Third model then is that you go back to the players that have incurred the offences that lead to those accumulation charges once that threshold is met, and retrospectively charge them for their proportion at that point. Benefits of this is it does assign the additional cost proportionately, and the players are only charged when it's incurred. So if you don't incur those additional fines, then you don't have to worry about going back and asking them for the money. On the downside, they may be incurred a long time after the offence, so the players may have left, so they may no longer be part of the club, which is going to make getting the money back off them nearly impossible. Or they may object and say, okay, I picked up this caution back in the first week of the season, but I haven't done anything else since. Why are you now coming back to me for another £5 or another tenner, whatever it may be? And then the fourth one, probably the complete opposite end of the spectrum from that first one, where it just comes out of club reserves, is that when those fees are incurred, they actually then just divide it amongst all players equally, whether that's at a team level or at a club level. Again, I'm going to cover the cons first, which is that, again, you may find that the offenders have left, and you may find that now the well-behaved players, the ones that haven't picked up a caution all season, will object to the fact that now they're being asked to contribute £5 or £10 towards a club or a team fee that actually they've had no part in incurring. It's not because of them. But equally, the incentive then for them is on the positives of this is that it encourages collective behaviour. It encourages your captain or your well-behaved players to rein in the poorly behaved ones, because actually there's a bit of a financial penalty or financial incentive for them as well to make sure that their teammates are playing or are behaving themselves properly. And again, if they do get to the point, or you will only have to go down this route if those additional accumulation charges are incurred. And if they aren't, you almost don't have to worry about it and it doesn't become an issue. So hopefully that gives you 4 options from one end of the spectrum to the other. As I said before, it really comes down to what you think will work best with your players or within your club as to which route you may decide to take. Our biggest advice would just, as I said throughout this evening, is just to make sure you're transparent with it. That's the best way of getting players and managers and club officials on board with it. Now, I've mentioned debt recovery earlier. I promised to go into it in a bit more detail, so I'll do that now. So the FA's debt recovery process is the only mechanism that's in place for players to be suspended for non-payment to clubs. Or perhaps I should say it is the only official mechanism for players to be suspended for non-payment to clubs. I know that some leagues will try and prevent players playing if they do owe money. They have no formal grounds to issue a suspension in those situations. However, the leagues are fantastic at trying to mediate between the two different clubs. And really, if you've got a player that's moving from your club to another, we would hope and expect the club that's signing the player to come to you and say, is there any money outstanding? And if there is, to encourage and influence the player to make sure that they have paid you back before they move to the new club. And that's where the leagues certainly can get involved. But in terms of formal suspensions from the FA that will cover all levels of football, the only mechanism for doing that is to go through that debt recovery process I described earlier. Now, there are very strict requirements for it. So the debt must be in excess of £25. So that means more than just a couple of cautions, unfortunately. It has to have been incurred within the last 112 days, but must have been outstanding for more than 28. And if you think back to that process I mentioned for week-to-week discipline a couple of minutes ago, that's why we were advocating that 28-day invoice period when you're beginning to think that you're not going to get it by going through the informal requests for payment. And that recommended process will make sure you are always within the debt recovery timelines. The other thing to note with those timelines and the 112 days in particular is if you get to the end of the season and players owe you money, come to us at the end of the season. Don't wait until the start of the next season. We're getting the usual kinds of requests from clubs at the moment saying that a player's walked out, he's moved to another part of the country, he's moved to another local team. He still owes us money from the last game of the season back in March or April. At this stage, it's unlikely we're going to be able to assist because it will be outside that 112-day period. The other requirement to bear in mind is that you must have sent written demands for payment. And that has to be more than just a WhatsApp message. It needs to be a formal invoice. Maybe it doesn't have to be a formal invoice, but it needs to be a formal email or something on club letterhead that goes to the player and says, you owe us £40 or £50 for these disciplinary offences incurred on these dates. Please make payment by X date. If not, we will refer this up to the county FA. And we do have templates that you can use for that as well. They just kind of use the appropriate kind of language, both for the request for payment from player and if you need to come to us and request action from us through the debt recovery process. If you do go down the debt recovery process, and I hate this part, there is a £25 administration fee which you as the club have to pay up front in order for us to take on the debt. So, hopefully that doesn't mean you're throwing good money after bad, because yes, you have to pay the £25 to us, but it does then get passed back onto the player. So if that player has walked out owing £25 to you, actually now they're going to owe £50 to you, plus £10 to us as the county, because we get an administration fee that we charge the player as well. I have mixed feelings about the £25 fee because it does put an extra burden on clubs. If you don't get the money back from the player, now you're out by another 25 quid. but it is there as a regulation, so we do have to abide by it, and we do have to therefore implement it if you do want to go down that route. What we do have as well is we do have some guides to this if you do want some more information, and I'm more than happy to send them out to everybody after the presentation. I'll send them out tomorrow for you. Are there any questions just around those different models and the debt recovery process before I move on to a couple of the FA systems that also may help out? Can't see anything in the chat, and I can't see any new hands up. Mark, I assume your hand's still up from earlier, or did you have another question? Okay, that's fine. No, it's gone down now. Thank you. I will crack on then. Before closing, and I'm conscious that you've been listening to me waffle on for 50 odd minutes at this stage, I just wanted to try and talk through a couple of systems or a couple of resources that we have in place, both at the county level and the FA, to help you with the financial management. The first is the whole game system, and I hope this isn't new for anybody. But this is where, as the club treasurer, you can access and pay county FA invoices and receipts, whether that's for affiliation or for discipline. And if you are looking at using Matchday, and I'll come on to that in a second, this is also where you will do that initial setup. If you have no other roles with the club beyond treasurer, that may well be the only functionality you have within whole game. But if you do have other roles, and a lot of you will also be player registration officers or maybe club secretaries, club chairs, you will find that obviously there is a raft of additional functionality to whole game to help you with the club management. But purely from a treasurer's point of view, it's you're able to go in and access any invoices to the club and pay them online through credit or debit card. Moving on to Matchday then. Matchday is a relatively new platform that the FA's had for a couple of seasons now, and this allows clubs to charge and receive payments from its players through PayPal. And you can set up recurring payments, you can set up one-off payments, so you can do annual subscriptions, you can invoice players for kit or equipment, you could invoice players for discipline through this, and you can also do recurring or occasional match fee ones as well for match subs. So you can actually go through as the team manager and say, right, these players attended the match today, so they're the ones who will pick up will get billed for the sub, rather than the players that weren't able to attend for whatever reason. Matchday is billed as very much as a team management hub. So in addition to the payment functionality, it allows your managers to coordinate fixtures, coordinate training times, submit reports into full time, submit their player lists through to full time and so forth. So it's really there effectively as your friend on the side of the pitch to help you on the match day, run the team and also process the finance side of it. If you are interested in Matchday, please let me know. There's a lot of webinars that the FA are running centrally this summer, which talks through in much more detail. I am going to hold my hands up and say it is not a platform I'm overly familiar with, mainly because I'm not part of a club due to my role as head of governance here at Bucks and Bucks. I'm not part of a club, which means I don't get the opportunity to play with it. We do have a couple of members of staff though that are beginning to are on Matchday, so may be able to assist you with any support you need on that. So just let us know. If you do need support with any technology, whether that is whole game system, Matchday, whether it is the lovely brand new player registration portal, I'm just going to put a link in the chat, which is to the grassroots technology support desk, I think is what they're calling it these days. And this is a great portal which they have a couple of hundred different solutions to and how-to guides for all of the most common kind of things you're going to be doing across the FA's digital platforms. They're also keeping it up to date with the inevitable bugs and kinks that have been coming out through the player registration system. So if you do get an error message or you do get stuck, by all means, use that link, take a look. There may well be, it's been flagged to the FA and they're working on a solution, or they may already have a solution, and that's at your fingertips, ready to access and implement. The next one then I just want to point you towards is the FA's club portal. So whole game is gradually going to integrate into this portal, which you should be currently using for player registrations. None of the finance side is through this yet. So if you are just a treasurer and you don't have any other roles, it may not be one you've seen so far. But it's found at clubs.thefa.com. And in that, one of the functions you will have access to is the My Club tab. And the reason I'm directing you towards this is that on here, there is access to a fantastic document, which under the organization profile, a guide to club structures. And if you are a club that is looking to grow or looking to incorporate as a business, register as a charity, take advantage of cask status or anything like that, this document will give you more information about that and talk you through or give you some initial information around that process. So strongly recommend taking a look at that if you are in that position. We also then can give you access, or not give you access, you then also have Sport England and Club Matters. And again, this is a really useful website that has a wealth of resources around how to run a grassroots sports organisation. I went on it earlier. There is a huge amount of information there just around club finances. This is generic across all sports, but they will have templates around budgeting. They don't unfortunately have balance sheets or P&L or financial statement templates, but they do talk about verification and auditing and what kind of reporting you should be doing on an annual basis. So I just put the link to that in the chat. Strongly recommend taking a look at that when you get a chance. And the final one is a resource we've put together, which I spoke about a couple of weeks ago now when we did a similar webinar for club governance. And that is a self-assessment guide that we've put together, which probably may take half an hour, 45 minutes or so to complete. But it's something for you as a club to sit and work through, reflect on where you are as a club against something like 50 odd criteria perhaps. Rag rate each one, and off the back of that, it gives you effectively a risk assessment for areas that you may want to consider looking at your internal structure, just to make sure that actually as an organisation, as club officers and the management committee, you're comfortable with the structure of the club, you're not incurring any individual risk, and that you know that the club is in a strong and sustainable position going forward. If anybody is interested in that, please just drop me an email or let me know. I can get that sent out to you. And then once you've had the opportunity to go through it, feel free to share it with me, and we can sit down and go through, offer some feedback on that and look to help you with a governance development plan if that is something that you wanted to explore. Went through that process with the club a couple of weeks ago. Really beneficial process for both them and for us as the county, because it gives us a much closer insight into the state of clubs and challenges facing you. So really encourage anybody that's interested to kind of go through that process. That is it for my presentation, bang on an hour, which I'm pretty pleased at. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or put your hand up and I will come to them. However, appreciate I've already kept you here for an hour and it's a lovely evening. So if you do want to leave at this point, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful. We will be running more sessions like this in the build up to the 21-22 season, and then pretty much on a monthly basis throughout the season, looking at different aspects of running a grassroots football club. So please feel free to join us for those, and I look forward to seeing you then.